I guess I probably never really dealt with the trauma much at all, but I remember him probably, and I'm talking like probably 10 years later when Louis was probably about 10, I remember someone asking him about the birth and he cried.
Oh.
He cried and I thought, wow, are you still really that traumatized from that? And he, even today, like he often, when we talk about it or someone brings it up, I can see that choke that he gets.
Hi everyone and welcome back to No Place Like Home. I'm one of your hosts, Jess, and we are here with Larissa.
Hello.
And Kelly.
Hello.
Kelly is one of the incredible care specialists we have working here at home. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your qualifications? And I mean, you've got a lot to share, so.
That I do. How long have we got? Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I am a midwife. I have actually been a midwife for now approximately 23 years.
Wow.
I know. It doesn't feel like that though. Honestly, it doesn't. I was actually one of the first bachelor midwifery students in Australia, or actually technically in Victoria. I did my degree at the Victorian University out in St Albans. And I know I used to drive from Hampton all the way out to St Albans every day.
Wow. With two little ones.
Yeah,
Wow.
I did. So that was tough. That was a really interesting time of my life. So I did that degree. That actually took an extra year. So it was supposed to be a 3-year degree, but it ended up being 4. So I became a registered midwife, not a nurse. I've never been a nurse. I've only ever been registered as a midwife. And I then worked as a midwife in all different aspects to kind of get through and to kind of, I guess build up that experience, resilience as well was sort of part of the requirement to get through that. And then I actually became one of the first eligible midwives in Queensland. So, by that stage, my husband and I had moved to Queensland and of all things, we opened a cafe.
As you do.
That's a story for another
That's
day.
a whole other story. I'll tell you about that later. So we moved up to Queensland. I started working in a small hospital and then we moved to Brisbane and, I decided to give it a go. I actually decided to become an eligible midwife, which means that I could get Medicare eligibility, and there was 9 of us in Queensland that did that at the time. So it was huge. There was lots of stumbling blocks and lots of issues, but we got through it, and we all sort of went out into private practice all separately, and that's kind of started. I became a private practice midwife. So I started a home birth practice.
Right.
I did that for many years. I started that in my lounge room of my house.
That's so cool.
We would have lots of pregnant women coming in and out. My boys used to see, heavily pregnant women and newly pregnant women and women having second pregnancies and choosing to have home births. It just became a thing that we would sit around, I would do my antenatal sessions in our lounge room.
Amazing.
And then I cleared out one of the boys' bedrooms and actually made it my office. So, so the boys had to kind of, shuffle around. And then obviously my career's kind of taken off from there.
Wow. And so you already had children when you became a midwife. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience in becoming a mum and what your postpartum was like? I mean, was postpartum care, how old are your boys?
Louis is 28 and Billy is 24.
So I have no idea what postpartum care was like back then, but I'm sure you can enlighten us.
Well, it literally didn't exist, Jess. And I had private obstetricians for my births.
So the best of the best care,
I had
right?
the best of the best, apparently.
And were you here in Victoria at that time?
No, so I had Louis in Canberra, actually. So Darren and I both grew up in Canberra. And we were both schooled in Canberra, and then we met, and obviously I fell pregnant, and we had Louis in the John James Hospital in Canberra, which technically was one of the first kind of private maternity centres services in Canberra.
Okay.
And it was very modern for its kind of time. But I did have a private obstetrician, and I had one of the top private obstetricians at the time in Canberra. So my birth with him was quite full on. It was induced. So we found out that my placenta was not working through the pregnancy. And mind you, I was 23 years old
Wow.
when I fell pregnant with Louis. I had him, actually I was 22 when I fell pregnant with him, and I was actually just turned 23 when I actually gave birth to him. Wow. So I was quite young, was very naive, and I look back now and I think, God, he was so naive. He didn't really know anything. And I did what all good girls did, you know. I had the private health insurance. I went to a private obstetrician and I just said yes. I said yes to everything.
Yeah.
And when we discovered that this very small baby that I was carrying would possibly have survived if I hadn't had that induction that day.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was 30. I just turned 38 weeks, and I was huge. I also had a condition called polyhydramnios. So I had lots and lots of amniotic fluid around my baby.
Oh.
Yeah, and ballooned. I was completely ballooned. Like I probably weighed, I probably tipped the scales at 100 kilos.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're
My
short
tiny little
as
frame.
well,
Yeah, I'm
so
5'2".
yeah.
Yeah, so I was very big, but it was technically all fluid.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we discovered that we were having this very tiny little baby, and I lay on an ultrasound bed, and the sonographer said to me, "You need to have this baby today or he's going to die."
Wow.
I was 23 and someone told me that.
Oh, my.
So I was like, oh, okay, I need to run back to my obstetrician who was across the road, and somehow they'd faxed the details. Again, this is in 1996, so there wasn't, didn't have email or internet or all those sorts of things.
True, no
Didn't have any mobile phones. There was no mobile phones then. So literally ran back across the road, and I walked into my obstetrician's office and I said, what are we going to do about this? Like I don't want my baby to die. Yeah. And he kind of huffed and puffed, and so said, oh, all right, we'll put you in for an induction. We'll take you in now. You ready?
Wow.
Kind of thing.
And did you have a birth plan? Were birth plans a thing then? No, you just trusted.
Not at all.
Trusted that your obstetrician was going to.
It was that whole good girl.
Yeah, it was a good girl.
This is the way I'm going to do it.
I just do what he knew better.
Yeah.
You know, he was the guy that was looking after me. So she said to me, look, go home, pack a bag. It's okay. You can go home, pack a bag. So I went home, I packed a bag, and I tell this story all the time. My boys thinks it's hilarious. So I go to him, babe, we're going to have a baby today. And he's like, what do you mean we're having a baby today? We're having a baby today. Okay, rightio. So we get in the car and we drive towards the hospital, which is kind of in a very local area, and he stops in at the local takeaway shop. And I'm like, what are you doing? We have to,
we've got to go.
We're going because I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything. He walks into this takeaway shop, comes out with a Chico roll, a bag of hot chips, and a can of Coke.
Oh, my God.
Yep.
And you're sitting there, 23 years old.
Heavily pregnant, looking like a balloon.
But he has to eat.
He has to eat. It's so important he eats. So we get to the hospital, he eats his thing, and so I then get put into a ginormous birthing suite, which is very plush back then. I get put into a hospital gown, and I get blood taken from my arms, and I get oxytocin put in my wrist, and they literally turn the oxytocin drip on. And almost 24 hours later, I have a baby.
Wow.
But yeah.
And he was okay?
He was okay. He was very tiny. So when they did eventually weigh him, he was 2.1 kilos.
Wow.
So that's 4 pound 6 or something.
Yeah.
Very tiny. There wasn't a skerrick of fat on any one of his bones. He looked like a little skinned rabbit. But a jet black hair, had this massive mop of black hair, but just was very, very tiny. So we couldn't even get, socks didn't fit him. They would literally fall off his legs. My mum actually had to go and get doll's clothes from David Jones to put him in because we couldn't fit anything on him.
Oh, wow.
And I unfortunately hemorrhaged a lot after that. So the birth was quite, I want to say, quite violent. I want to call it
Yeah.
violent.
Yeah.
It was very
Yeah.
violent. It was a forceps delivery. And yeah, I lost 3 litres of blood that day
Wow.
and passed out for a solid another 12 hours, and they actually induced me with drugs to stop me moving. So I literally was given a sedative to be kept still so they could work on my uterus to keep me alive.
Oh my
Wow.
God, Kelly.
Yeah, it was pretty full on.
And where was
Yeah.
your baby and
So Darren was holding him
Yeah,
at the
okay,
time,
yeah.
and Darren was watching the whole thing
Oh
from
my
the
gosh,
corner.
that
And they
would've
literally
been-
just handed him this tiny little baby and said, "Stand there, mate. We've got to
Save your wife.
save her." Yeah.
So he's just going about his day. Next minute, you're like, "We're having a baby today." Next minute,
He's eating a chicken roll, and then he's holding a
Thank
baby.
goodness he ate that
Yeah, thank
chicken
God he
roll
ate, yeah.
because it was a long birth.
Yeah, it was very long, very
yeah.
long labour. Yeah.
How was your recovery from that?
Look, in those days again, and especially in a private hospital, you could stay as long as you needed to. So I stayed 10 days in that hospital, but I didn't. My memory is I did not move out of that hospital bed. And my baby was in a nursery, and in those days again, there was no rooming in. Your baby did not stay with you because again, we were in a private hospital, so it's a bit kind of lush. So your baby was sent to the nursery, but my baby was tube fed anyway. So I actually never breastfed Louis at all.
Okay.
I didn't even get the chance to breastfeed him because I was so unwell, and I'd passed out and I didn't return to consciousness for 12 hours. So half of that was sedative and half of that was just trauma.
Yeah.
And I still clearly remember waking up in that bed, and that bed was covered in, I was still in the same gown that I went in. It was covered in blood.
Oh my gosh.
Darren was sitting beside me, and he had sat there the whole night, and his words were, "I watched your chest rise and fall."
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine, everything that everyone goes through in birth, the birthing person, takes such a toll on the birthing person, but the partners.
The partner. Yeah.
And there's so little support
Yeah.
for them and so little advice and oh my gosh.
Yeah. And he used to, it's really interesting. I guess I probably never really dealt with the trauma much at all, but I remember him probably, and I'm talking like probably 10 years later when Louis was probably about 10, I remember someone asking him about the birth, and he cried.
Oh.
He cried, and I thought, wow, are you still really that traumatized from that? And he, even today, like he often, when we talk about it or someone brings it up, I can see that choke that he gets.
Yeah. I mean, the love of his life.
Oh, absolutely.
And
yeah.
oh my gosh.
And I remember talking to him about it even a couple of days ago. He sort of said, it would have been awful if you had died. It would have been awful. And I said, yeah, it probably would have been. You would have been a single father. But yeah, it was,
When do you feel like you started to become yourself? I mean, we go through that transition, so there's no yourself in the true sense once you become a mother. But when do you feel like you started to, I suppose, connect with Louis and like sort of get that sense of self back?
I think interesting you asked that question because I was actually a nanny before I had a baby. So I always had a very much, and I was the eldest of 10 kind of grandchildren. So I kind of always had babies around me. So to be honest, I don't know if I ever lost myself.
Okay.
To be truly honest.
Yeah.
And I never really, and again, I think when I got home, I picked up, I was bottle feeding this baby. I just moved on. I never really, to be honest, and it's only been probably in the last maybe 5 or 6 years that I've really gone, wow, that was pretty traumatic, that birth, and this is 28 years ago. I'm kind of now thinking about that. But, I came from a long line of women who went to work. My grandmother owned a business. My mum worked for my grandmother. And so, they just got on with stuff.
Yeah.
So I just got on with stuff. And I didn't really, to be
Pull
honest.
yourself up by your bootstraps.
Literally.
And off you go.
Off you go.
Yeah.
You just go back to work, which I did. And, I took a baby with me, or my mum took my baby. So yeah,
Yeah.
It wasn't. I don't know that I ever lost
Yeah.
myself in that, but there was definitely no postnatal care. The postnatal care I had was from my family.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did all of that experience then, how did you move through to your next pregnancy and
Yeah.
birth? Like, was that,
3.5, almost 4 years later. Took me a
Yeah.
long time. And it wasn't because I couldn't get pregnant. We as a couple had
Yeah.
chose that was pretty traumatic. Like, let's kind of wait a little bit till we get over that. So Louis was 3.5 by the time I was, pregnant, and then turning 4 when I had Billy. So my next pregnancy, we'd moved to Melbourne. So we'd come here. I'd actually inquired about becoming a midwife, but I never, because I was pregnant, I didn't go through with it. But I went to an incredible obstetrician. Again, the good girl in me went, oh, you really should go to an obstetrician. And again, I had the best of the best. I had kind of one of the top obstetricians at the Royal Women's Hospital, and kind of walked in there and said to him, look, I've had this horrible kind of birth experience. I don't want to go through that again. So he's like, that's fine. It's no problem. It won't ever happen again. Happened again.
Are you serious?
I lost 1.5 litres in my next labour and birth. I had an induction as well. And I had induction. The reason why I had an induction was because Billy was actually due on Christmas Day.
Oh.
And so I was induced, 5 days earlier because it didn't coincide with Christmas. So he was born on the 21st of December. So I had another very kind of traumatic, not as dramatic as the hemorrhage that I had with Louis, but I still hemorrhaged quite severely. And my obstetrician said to me afterwards, he said, you should probably not have any more babies. Or if you do, you should have a Caesar.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wowzers. Did you have a different sort of a plan going into that? I know you went with, private OB and all the rest of it, but was there anything else around that you thought, okay, I'm going to do something a bit different this? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And again, I guess I was just oblivious to it.
Yeah.
I was and again, I kind of had this thought process that these people are going to look after me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to do what they tell me to do.
Yeah.
And again, I was, by that stage I was kind of in 26, 27, so I was kind of a little bit older, but I was still fairly young,
Still a baby.
Still, like when we talk about it now, 26, 27 is still
young.
Yeah, like that would be classed as young nowadays to be having children.
And I've had 2 children by the time you're 26.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a plan, to be honest. I don't recall making a plan. Again, I guess my plan was I walk in the obstetrician's office and he tells me what to do.
Yeah.
And when to do it.
Yeah.
And we don't really want to have a baby on Christmas Day, do we? So might we just have one 4 days beforehand? Oh, yeah, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah. And I remember coming out of hospital on Christmas Day with a newborn.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were looked after through that process?
I have to say no, even though, again, I was in one of Melbourne's top private hospitals. No, I don't think I was. And again, no care afterwards. To be honest, I never saw a midwife.
Wow.
The only time I saw a midwife was at some stage from my memory of them putting a drip in my arm, turning the Syntocin on up every now and again, and I never saw a midwife afterwards.
Wow.
No.
And so second time around you were here in Melbourne, so no family around.
No family around.
So
no.
No one to support you, no one to help with the babies.
My mum and my parents actually moved to Melbourne from Canberra. When Billy was born, my mum said, it was mainly, I guess it was probably more for them. They didn't want to miss out on grandchildren because I'm the eldest, and so I was the only one having children back then. So they moved their whole entire lives here to Melbourne, and they were here to help.
Yeah.
So that really, again, that was my postnatal care. My mum was my postnatal care. Like, she came and just swooped in and took over everything.
Yeah.
But I breastfed Billy, whereas I didn't breastfeed Louis. Mm-hmm. So I had that connection a bit more, and he wasn't taken away from me to be fed by other people. I was always had him with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this, I'm imagining, influenced your decision to become a midwife, but also you never saw a midwife. So
No.
it's interesting that You even kind of like you knew.
What's funny about that, Jess, is that, and my mum tells me this story only not long ago, but apparently all of my Barbie dolls were pregnant.
Okay.
My Barbie dolls were having babies. Yeah. So it was somewhere there
Yeah.
all the time. And again, like literally from school, I became a nanny, you
Yeah,
know, and I looked
yeah.
after babies
Yeah.
all the time. So there was something always there for me.
A strong maternal
There's a
instinct.
strong somewhere. And, you know,
Yeah.
I said I'm the eldest of, 10 grandchildren. So all my aunts were having babies and I was always there to kind of, change nappies and,
Yeah.
be part of their baby kind of, plan.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it was just something ingrained in me
Yeah.
that I just decided that that's where I wanted to go.
Gosh, and just how the level of care you would be offering the mums, like for you to have given birth with a private obstetrician both times to then be a home birth midwife.
Yeah.
Like, what a contrast.
Huge contrast.
So then with that, like inherent almost like this is just what you're supposed to do, was then the midwifery training and everything, was that what you thought it was going to be?
I guess yes and no. So, and again, we were the first really. So, and